Hey, everybody. Patrick Verino here. We're here to talk about onboarding and social needs. What are the important social needs that we have to have when we do onboard people? And before I get into the social needs, I want to talk about really when does onboarding start? And, some of the conversations I've had, people say, well, it starts with the interviewing. And certainly I think it does go back that far. I believe it goes back even a little further than that. And I think it goes back all the way to onboarding starts with the ad that you place for this employee. And the reason I bring this up is because onboarding is such a vital part of um, keeping people retained. We know that within the first year of employment, about a third of employees will look to leave an organization. If you look through the Great Resignation, there were a lot of surveys out there where they're saying that people that had left within 6 months, upwards of 40 or 50% of those individuals were questioning their decision in terms of leaving the organization that they were with. So what I want to talk about first is just sort of some pre-onboarding, I guess we'll put it that way, and then talk about the social needs. What are the social needs that we can address, or I think that we need to address? And this isn't going to be about setting up a structure in terms of how you actually onboard, because I think this is more important. I think if we understand the social needs that employees have when they join an organization, and we look to structure our onboarding around addressing those, we will fill in all the holes. And I'll talk about a few tips for each of the social needs that we're going to talk about on how you can address that. So what the social need is, and then how to address it. To start with, though, I want to talk about the ad, how important that is. And what I'm going to use as my example is I was just online recently on Amazon, and I was looking to order some pens. And believe it or not, this is my favorite pen. It's from Staples. It's a 1.0 medium ballpoint pen. I love the way it writes. I write in a journal every morning. I've had cross pens, watermark pens. I had a Mont Blanc Sapphire pen that I actually lost at a lacrosse game in a field, believe it or not, this past spring. That was an expensive loss. But of all of those, I will tell you the pen that I've enjoyed the most, I think, for me personally, is this. And it's 12 of them I get for about $8. But what's interesting is that when I was on Amazon and looking for this pen, I just happened to look at some of the reviews, and one was it was like a 1. And I was like, why is there a 1 for this pen? So I was curious. So I looked, and it said, that the ad was deceptive because the box shows 12, and this person only received 1 pen. That was it. So they spent almost $8 for just 1 Staples pen. Now I love the Staples pen, but it's not worth $8 for 1. And to me, I thought that was interesting because, again, I look at that the way that we run ads for employees. You are selling a job, a position, an organization. And the more accurate you can be in terms of what that description is, I think that's important because that starts to build the potential buyer's remorse if what is advertised and what is received is not the same thing. So with this pen, I ended up buying them through Staples because I got 12 of them for that price. But can you imagine somebody gets on board and they find out after they're on board that they can't get promoted for a year, right? They can't get promoted for a year. It wasn't really discussed ahead of time, and now they realize they can't get promoted for a whole year. Now, does that necessarily need to go in the ad? No, but it certainly needs to come in the next section, which is after the ad is then, from an onboarding standpoint, the interview becomes so important here that I think in this environment where we're challenged with employees uh, in terms of finding good talent, that we're so excited and amped up and wanting to fill positions that maybe we oversell, or we don't talk about some of the downsides enough of the organization, whatever those are. And my point to this is that set the expectations as much as you can, right? So if you have a policy in place that prohibits any type of promotion within 1 year or 2 years, which in my own personal opinion, I think is a mistake. but that's a side note. I think you need to talk about that. And maybe I would use things around behavioral interviewing. I would ask people about their past experience in terms of being promoted and what their expectations are. Or if you know that you have a team that can be difficult to deal with, then from a behavioral interviewing standpoint, which you can Google, this is not going to be a workshop on behavioral interviewing, but there are a lot of good strategies that we can use. And one could be, tell me about a time you had to work for a team that there were some difficult personalities. How did you deal with that? Because now I get an understanding of how this person may be able to fit into what's going on. Or tell me about a time that you had some conflict with a team member, and how did you resolve that? How were you able to work through that? Those are things that are going to be important, right? So step one is the ad. Step two is the interview in terms of onboarding. And then if the person accepts the job, to me, the next part of onboarding really as the hiring manager for this individual is to start reaching out to that person before they show up for their first day of work. And this isn't to bombard them with emails, but what I want to do is I want to reinforce the excitement that I have about bringing them on board, right? So when they leave, if they're not going to start for 3 weeks or 4 weeks because they're going to give a notice, or maybe it's just 2 weeks, what I want to do is I want to make sure that in those 2 weeks that they're not with me anymore or not part of our company yet. I want to reinforce that they've made a good decision. And to me, this is, again, it's almost like selling your organization, because what we don't want to have happen is as can happen in any products that we buy, is buyer's remorse. People start questioning, oh, is this going to be the right decision? Am I going to the right company? Should I stay where I am? I want to reach out to this person ahead of time to just simply say in an email, I'm really looking forward to having you on board. This is what you can expect next. And an important one here is, will you? And again, I won't go through all the research on this, but we know will you is a very powerful way to present a request to somebody, because it requires them to voluntarily commit to either yes, they will, or no, they won't do it. And I might use this in the sense of saying, after they're on board, if you have any questions, if you're concerned about anything that we've talked about how this new role is gonna fit for you, will you reach out to me? Right? If you're nervous at all, will you reach out to me? And what that does is it provides an opportunity for that person to say, yeah, I'll reach out to you. And then from a standpoint of consistency, which is a strong influence principle, we know that if they are having second thoughts, they've told us that they will reach out to us. And I've actually given them permission to be able to do that. I want to hear about those things. So I think that's something important for us to think about. I'll answer. There's a question that just came up. Give me a second here, and I'll go on to that. As I said, I didn't want to turn this into an interviewing class, but I do think it's important. So the next thing that I want to talk about really are the social needs, right, around SCARF. And these were created by a gentleman named David Rock, a neuroscientist out of Australia. And I have found these 5 social needs to be vitally important. So the first one that we talk about is status. The next one we talk about is certainty. The next one we talk about is autonomy. The next one we talk about is relatedness. And the last one we talk about is fairness. And he talks about these social needs that we all have and the impact that they have on us. And what I mean by that is that when these social needs are satisfied, we become more engaged. We become more collaborative. We sort of feel more included. When they are violated or they're absent, we become disengaged. We become less collaborative. We pull away, right? So when we talk about the first one, which is status, right? This is all about feeling valued, feeling appreciated, that our status is elevated. This isn't about a title at that point. It's just feeling as though you feel valued. The next one is around certainty, right? And this is, do I understand what the expectations are, the rules of the road, how important this is, right? The next one is around autonomy. And this is, do I feel as though I have some control over my destiny here? Yes, I'm coming on board to this organization, but do I feel as though I'm going to have autonomy to be able to set my own course here, right? The next one is relatedness. Do I feel connected? Do I feel part of this group or this organization? Um, do I feel connected with my manager, with the person that's hired me? And then lastly is fairness. It's about equity and equitable treatment. Do I feel like the rules are the same for everybody here? They apply across the board. That we're all treated in similar ways. That there's equity. So the first one we talk about um, status, right? So what are some of the ways that we can promote status within an organization, or as part of onboarding? Is maybe on the first day of bringing somebody on board, that as I'm introducing them, I'm highlighting past achievements that they've had at other companies, things that they've done, right? So that elevates their level of status when I do that, introducing them to other people. Setting them up with a mentor is another way that we can elevate their status, right? We show their value and their importance, that we want somebody to be able to help them navigate where they are. And there are other values to that, or other social needs that one hits as well. Um, Providing regular feedback is an important opportunity that we have to elevate somebody's status. Recognizing them, even for small things that they're doing in terms of how they're acclimating, can be really important in terms of creating um, a sense of status. Also, talking about um, other opportunities, other ways that they can enhance their skill set is important, because it shows an investment in them. So those are some ways that we can start to promote or satisfy that need of social status. So the next one is certainty, and certainty can again start out as part of the advertisement, go into the interview, and certainly as part of the the pre-onboarding before they show up, right? That starts to create an environment where they start to see what the expectations are. But on the first day that somebody shows up, setting a 30, 60, 90 plan for them is is vitally important, right? So that they understand what's the structure, what's the first 30 days going to look like, what's the first 60 days going to look like, and what are the first 90 days going to look like. Vitally important in terms of how we do that. Um, Making sure that they're clear in regards to their job function and their roles and their responsibilities, what the reporting structure is. All of those things become important. Anything around creating certainty. Checking in with them is important here too. How are things going? Right? It's been 2 weeks since you've been on board here. Is is what you expected and what you're experiencing, are they the same? Right? Because that elevates their status, right? I'm asking them their thoughts on this. I'm valuing their opinion, and it lets them know that they're not alone here. That I want to make sure that this is a successful onboarding process for you. So that's the next one around certainty. Authority is the next one, and authority can come into play where I'm asking people in regards to maybe even how their workstation is set up, giving them the opportunity to say, how would you like this set up? What works for you, right? Or as part of their training, giving them opportunities to talk about how they would like to implement different parts of their training. Any opportunity I can provide them where they have an opportunity to feel as though they are part of the process, that I'm working with them, and it's not that I'm dictating to them in terms of what they're going to do, then I satisfy that need. The next one is around relatedness, an important one, right? Feeling connection. And that can come into play in terms of relatedness, where maybe I'm setting up informal coffees with other people on the team, or we're getting together for a lunch to make a formal introduction. Any opportunity that I can have to create an environment where this person feels as though they are included. Maybe it's asking them to attend a meeting that normally they wouldn't need to attend at this point, but I want to be able to introduce them to some other people. Those are all opportunities where I create relatedness. And then the last one is around fairness. And to me, fairness and certainty oftentimes go together, in that when I'm creating certainty, or when I'm creating fairness, it's about making sure that I'm transparent, that I walk the talk, that what they're being told is going on, and what they're experiencing are the same things. So reviewing policies and procedures and then seeing how they actually play out. Those are areas that we can create a sense of fairness. So again, I think those social needs become so important. And as I had mentioned at the beginning of this is not about sort of designing what your onboarding strategy might look like. I think it's more important than that. It's creating your onboarding process around understanding those five social needs. That as we put this together, how does this address certainty? How in our onboarding can we make sure that we're promoting autonomy and elevating somebody's status and creating certainty for them and creating a sense of relatedness and also creating a sense of fairness. And I'll go back to the beginning of this where, I talked about a third of employees in many surveys will suggest they look to leave within the first year. I would argue that it comes down to when they show up on day one, if they have a poor onboarding experience, what tends to happen is they will start to think from that day, did I make a mistake? Should I have stayed where I was? And then that feeds into what we call confirmation bias, in that if I start to ask myself or focus on the thought that maybe I made a mistake, I will look to additional evidence that will suggest, Patrick, you're right. You did make a mistake. You shouldn't have come here. And I think that's vitally important for us to recognize how important these five social needs are. So as I suggested, where does onboarding start? Starts with your ad. From there, it goes to the interviewing process. From there, once somebody accepts the job, it goes to reaching out to them before they start their first day of work, to build that level of excitement and confirmation that they're making the right decision and you're excited to have them on. You're starting to sort of play into those social needs, right? Somebody feels pretty important when you're reaching out to them ahead of time to tell them how excited you are to have them contribute to your team. Their level of status is certainly going up at that point, as well as relatedness is also going up, right? So next on the first day of work, we want to talk about really how do we make sure that we hit on all of those: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So as I'm looking now here, right, we have a question. What are your thoughts on case-based interviewing strategies? As I mentioned, in this interview, I'm not really about sort of the case-based, but my guess is if that's anything along the lines of trying to get them to sort of talk through um, how they would approach things. Um, I'm all about trying to get them from a behavioral standpoint to talk about not theorizing what they would do, but talking about exact experiences that they have had in the past that demonstrate. And the reason I bring that up is that I think oftentimes, right, if I was asking somebody, how do you deal with conflict? Well, I'm great at dealing with conflict. Or how do you deal with people, upset customers? Oh, I'm really good at that, right? Because it's like a dating environment, right? We're going to put our best foot forward, I think. But when I start asking them questions about, tell me about a time when, it's not that they can't sort of BS their way through that, but it provides much more of an opportunity to see an actual case, I guess, if hopefully those two are aligned, of how they would go through that. So I hope you found this valuable. Again, well, I went actually a little longer than I had expected. I think these are all so important, though, these five social needs. Last thing that I will say is that even if you're not onboarding somebody new, if you're merging teams, I'd think of those five social needs again, because they impact how two teams will come together and how individuals feel, either as maybe the team that's established or the team that's being merged with an established team. Those five social needs, again, become vitally important to understanding strategies to how to create a merging of teams or organizations that is successful. By all means, any questions, any comments outside of this, reach out to me. I love having these conversations, and any opportunity I have to talk about them, I'd love to have that. So